Today we're going to talk about planers. The safety conditions for using a planer are the same with every other woodworking tool. Good eye protection, hearing protection, and I recommend short sleeve shirts, but I know that's not the reality with all the unheated workshops there are, so at the very least have tight fitting clothing. What I have here today is an older Makita planer, and it's what we call a 15-inch. And the reason we call it a 15-inch is because this planer will take wood that's up to 15 inches wide. Benchtop planer or a stationary planer like this one has an in-feed and an out-feed. And in this planer, this is the in-feed side, and the wood runs through just like this. This particular planer has rollers on top so that you could run the wood back if there were two people planing, or if it's by yourself, it's just a place to hold the wood so that you can readjust the height and make another pass again. To adjust the thickness of a planer, you always put the flat side of the wood down because the cutting heads are almost always in the top. And the way you adjust the height, there's usually some sort of a wheel or a crank that will adjust the height. If you're doing multiple boards, or if you're just doing a single board, for example, the first pass we would run it through here. The second pass we might come on the other side, or we might come in the middle, but we try and vary the cuts across the blade just so we get even wear on the blade. One of the problems with planers is something called snipe, and that's where the knives take a little bit of an extra cut out of one side or the other, or both. And the way you can eliminate that is to have another piece of scrap wood that's the same thickness, and you run that through first of all, then butt your piece right up to it and push it through, and when it goes through you can move that around and put it in the back way, and that will eliminate snipe on your boards. One of the common issues with planers and with jointers is grain tear out, and that's what happens when the blades are running against the grain of the wood. They actually tear the grain out, and this planer, the blades would be running exactly the way I'm showing, and you can see how the grain, how it would be running against the grain. It's running against the tops of each of these grain lines that I've drawn on here. But by simply turning the board around like this, now you can see how those blades are now running with the grain because they're just skimming the tops of those lines that I've put on there. And that's how you avoid tear out, by running with the grain. So let's do a quick test of that. So there's our wood, and you can see that that's a nice smooth transition all the way across. It's a beautiful smooth piece of wood. So here's exactly what we mean in setting the jointer knives. Watch how it'll pick up the ruler and just move it ahead 1/8 of an inch. The next thing you want to do in your setup, now this isn't usually a problem, but it's a good idea to check it, is to get some kind of a flat measuring device. I have this aluminum bar, and it's very accurate, and you want to check to make sure that your outfeed table and your infeed table are parallel to one another. So you can't have one of them at one kind of an angle or another. So what I do is I have a measuring device, and you can use these little bars or whatever you have, feeler gauges or something, to measure these to make sure that they're actually the same and that it's parallel all the way along there. The next thing to check is to make sure that your fence is absolutely at 90 degrees. And you can use any kind of a steel rule. I really like steel rules because they're accurate and they don't move. and it's important that that be absolutely 90 degrees. We're going to run some wood through the jointer right now, and we always have the crown on top, and I think you can actually see that from that vantage point. And of course we use hearing protection, eye protection, but we also use these push pads when running through the jointer. So there's our face, nice and flat, and you can see that the crown is down there. So for my second run, now I'm going to do the edge. So you always do the face first, then you do the edges, and you make sure that the face is nice and flat up against your fence. That's all it takes to run wood on the jointer and get good quality results. Make sure your jointer is set up properly. We run the face first, then we run the edges, and we always keep the crown side up on the jointer.